We're not all big shots, and we don't multis and whatever. But what we are at the end of the day is good people, and you can see also the English people too. They're good people. I think it's important when you go back to Australia is to talk about your experiences here. Not to promote my business, don't get me wrong, that might be good.
I was going to ask you whether there was a sponsor involved.
But talk about Steve-O's Heritage Centre. How good's that? Talk about him as a bloke. Talk about the people you met down in Leeds in a pub or whatever. But also don't forget some of the other things we did culturally. We went to Ireland and the people there. We went to Scotland, different people. Scotland's about war and we fought these bastards and we fought those bastards. Irish people are about, we're great people, we love everybody and all that. So it's great. It's a great thing to see different cultures. But again, all I like to say is thank you very much. Okay?
Great.
Hang on, we
got 3 rooms spare.
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much too. I know the tour didn't start off well with a lot of my things. I made a bad decision there. I misread a quote, £4.20. I hope you forget about that. But I think if anyone who went to Hull, I think they had a really good day, didn't they? And I'll just reiterate what Craig said. Gee, they're good people over here, aren't they? And I was lucky enough to play here back in '68, but it's sad in some ways that you don't experience probably the club games and that, but I was lucky enough to do that. But what we saw, I think a fair bit of the passion of the English rugby league people, how they are about the game. Even there last night, they get the flogging. I know there was a little bit of a mass exodus with about 10 minutes to go, and then they got trampled. But the bottom line, a lot of people stayed there to appreciate what Darren Lockyer has done for our country. And how lucky are we that the Australians lost the toss? We got to stay at the pub with the Australian Rugby League team. How good was that? And it just shows you how good of people they are. You've got to take your hat off to those blokes. Anything they ask, You met a lot of good people. You met Darren Lockyer's mum and dad. How lucky were we to be there at the end to see Lockie's last stand? And I reckon that was a bonus anyway. But I will leave you with one little joke. These people up at Hull, because Jerry turned around and he told me, didn't you, Jerry, you wanted me to tell this joke? The people at, it's not a joke, it's almost a true story. But I was lucky, I was lucky enough to play with the greatest coach, I think. A lot of people would think Wayne better, but I think that Jack Gibson was the greatest coach ever because he was well before his time. We were doing a lot of things back in the 70s. I was going to say Tommy would have said that it would have ended up in jail. No, that's not the case, but we were doing things like, we were doing a form of the beef test. Jack was an incredible coach, He was weighing us every month. Now mind you, he might have 2 sets of scales for me. We had a form of the beef test. And in those days you had to have a job, Everyone from 1 to 52 had to have a job, not like people today. So, but Jack reckoned that if he could look after a few things, the only things that he thought would go wrong, there were 3 things. 1 was trouble with your work, 2 was finance, and the other one was the relationship with your missus, right? He had a code of ethics too, but that's another story. My form went off a bit. So I turned around, Jack got me in on one-on-one. He said, "What's the problem, Beetson?" He said, "You're down a bit in your form." I said, "Titties." He said, "What do you mean, tits?" I said, "My missus, she's had 3 kids, she's lost her boobs." He said, "She's driving me crazy." He said, "That is a problem, isn't it?" He said, "I know a bloke called Dr. Greenberg up the coast, you should go up and see him." And I know a lot of people, footballers, that go to a certain extent to gain on edge, right? I know a bloke called Danny Stones, he used to use caffeine overload. Some people use hypnosis, other things, right? So I said, oh, I'm prepared to try anything. So we took Nolene up the cross. Then I sat down with Dr. Greenberg. He said, do you believe in the power of positive thinking? I said, yes, I do. Yeah, I'll get going. What I want you to do, after you have breakfast, lunch and dinner, practice this little thing. So what's that? So he said, what I want you to do, after you have breakfast, lunch and dinner, do this little thing, massage your boobs. I know what you're trying this, Carmel. Rub-a-dub-dub. If I believe and give it a go, my titties will grow. So she did that, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And you wouldn't believe it, the boobs started to flare up a bit. So she used to work at Franklin's in Cladesville. We lived at Denison. She got the bus in the morning after a couple of weeks. On the bus, she jumped on the bus, and she sat there on the bus driver. The bus driver could see her in the rear vision mirror. It wasn't Harry. Anyway, turned around, she said, oh shit, I forgot, I'm in a hurry, forgot to do my little ditty. So here she is in the bus, and she's going rub-a-dub-dub, if I believe and give it a go, my titties will grow. And the bus driver can watch her in the rear vision. He said, look at me and said, hey missus, you've been up to see that Dr. Greenberg up the cross. And Nolan said, how'd you know? He said, hickory dickory dock.
True story.
It's almost.
That's a golden phone.
Yeah, no.